I'm just going to run through some do's and don'ts with regard to smart pop culture writing. Of course, these things are just my opinion, as all things in pop culture and writing are always someone's opinion. But I'll tell you a little bit about what I think and what I've learned in my 10 to 15 years, however long it's been now, of writing about this stuff. So I would say, first of all, some of these are going to be review, but it doesn't hurt. My first big do is to make a fresh argument or point. You want to make sure that this isn't something that everybody's saying, otherwise why bother, right? And it's tougher and tougher these days. Everyone's running around blogging about everything all the time, especially pop culture. So look at what else is out there before you start writing or before you pitch to editors, and try to formulate a new opinion point, even just a new way of looking at it, a new entry point, something to add to the discussion. If you remember from our last video, for instance, the Oscar post we look at didn't just say, hey, the Oscars were sexist. They tied it into a bunch of other phenomena going on at the time as well, like Sheryl Sandberg's book. So that's sort of what the ultimate goal is, to tell us something we don't already know. I know it's hard, but you have to try. Another thing is to do thorough research and reporting. I'm a big fan of reporting, so I'm always talking about it in all of my classes. And I just, I think it's really important, whether you're a trained reporter or not, we can all do it. All you have to do is ask questions and look for the answers and make sure that the answers are as accurate and trustworthy as possible. But you do have to do a little bit of research. You can't just blather on about things and your own opinions because, people don't know you, so they don't know why they should listen to you. Whether you're an amazing expert on this topic or not, you need to have facts to back up your opinions. You can't just say this was great or this sucked. You have to tell us why, you have to describe what happened, and you have to give us context. If you can kind of go back in history sometimes in pop culture, tell us what came before it. That could be great. Tell us what kinds of effects this thing might have in the future. That's great. Do some interviews. You can interview people who are experts in sociology or psychology, or the people behind the making of the shows or movies or music that you're talking about. There's a lot of ways to give context and get statistics, viewership, readership, numbers. Any of those things can help kind of round out a story depending on what your point is. But you really want to have that feeling that you did your homework, because that is how people are going to believe you. The last do that I have kind of goes along with that, which is to check your facts, please. Don't just use Wikipedia. It's a great resource, but notoriously unreliable. So if you get stuff from there, just make sure you check it elsewhere. Same thing goes for just random blogs you've never heard of. The more sort of reputable the source, usually the better off you are. At least it looks a little more defensible, right? When you say, I got my information from the New York Times rather than I got my information from Susie's blog. So keep that in mind. After you do your research, if you're going to use a fact, double check it just to make sure. There's tons of misinformation out there, especially in the realm of pop culture writing, right? Which reminds me, maybe try to stay away from too much repeating of unreliable, nefarious gossip type things. Hopefully none of us here are even, wanting to write too much about gossip. I know I have a severe distaste for it for the most part, but there's a fine line between pop culture and gossip at some point, and we have to talk about certain things like Brad and Angelina, they're together, and we know how they got together, But just make sure that you're not just repeating unsourced things you saw on TMZ, for instance. You want to be fair and careful as possible, and just to keep up your own reputation, and make sure that you give credit when you get your information from, say, another blog. Especially, people really tend to like when you give them credit and link to them, and often will call you out if you do not give them credit and link to them. So you don't want to be, stealing other people's information that they got from their hard-won reporting without giving them credit. So keep all of those things in mind. And then I have a few don'ts. I personally feel like, it's best not to be too petty, mean, or superficial. These are all easy things to fall into when you're writing about pop culture. We are trained in our society to not think of our celebrities as people. It's a strange thing. We tend to think of them as both gods and goddesses, but also people we can just trample all over because they're not real. And they do have feelings, I swear, and they may very well read what you write about them, which should not give you a heady sense of power so much as just a consciousness to make sure to be as fair to them as you would be to anyone else. I think we've all seen, terrible things said about people like Kim Kardashian, for instance. That's been a big thing lately, and people feel like because they don't like her, they've decided they don't like her even though they've never met her in person, that it's okay to say mean things about her. There's this feeling out there a lot that these people put themselves out there, so we should be able to say whatever we want. But I would like to encourage you as much as possible to not be sort of personal about it, not be mean about it. And, similarly not be superficial in the way that so many other people fall into, like calling Kim Kardashian fat because she's gained weight because she's pregnant. That is not cool, and that's certainly not of a mind with the idea of smart pop culture writing. We want to stay away from that. So the only thing we want to be writing about, I think, with regard to that is maybe if you were examining why other people are doing that, that falls more under the realm of media criticism and is certainly fair game at some point when it becomes really ubiquitous. But, just keep all that in mind. As I said, you want to make sure not to repeat unconfirmed rumors. I mean, that goes for certainly gossipy stuff, but any kind of unconfirmed rumors you want to watch out for. There's a lot of those in Hollywood, both with regard to, say, someone's next project and also with regard to their personal lives. So just try to be careful. And these people, I will tell you, they do have high-powered agents and attorneys and things like that looking out for them, and you never know who might run across, say, a blog post you wrote about someone. They are watching, and you may get a phone call. So you want to stay as clean and straight and narrow as possible so that you can say, actually, I got this from this source, and it's reliable. And the more that you can sort of defend your own actions, the better off you're going to be. Plus, you should just be a good person. And I would say my last big don't is just, I've written about this lately, just be careful not to start ascribing too much weight to pop cultural figures. For instance, the example I've used a lot recently is Beyonce. There's been a lot of talk about Beyonce in the last several months, and especially around the subject of feminism. And while it's interesting to talk about her, in the realm of feminism and what she represents and why so many women respond to her particularly powerful image, for instance, it's also important not to end up essentially blaming the decline of feminism on Beyonce, just as, say, the quintessential example back in the 90s was when Time magazine put Ally McBeal on the cover and asked if she was the death of feminism. Of course she's not. She's not real. So, you have to just be careful to not sort of blame these people and stop at just, making it like, why is Beyonce doing this? Instead, and why is she taking down feminism? Instead you might want to look at what she means to women in feminism, and then if there are problems associated with her, maybe you look at the societal ways we can fix them. I think Rihanna is another good example recently of, let's not blame her for all of domestic violence and what she has personally gone through. We all know what she's gone through, and certainly we can use her story as a teachable moment, but instead of blaming her, we could look at, say, the remedies perhaps that we could use in our society to stop domestic violence or change how we talk about it. So keep all of those things in mind, and when you're writing your pieces, hopefully that will keep you on the right track.